You know, 3 years after the height of the pandemic, and children are still trying to make up that gap in their education from schools being closed.
Yeah, really tough. During his exclusive discussion with the school superintendents in both Miami-Dade and Broward counties, CBS News Miami's Jim DeFede asked them how they plan to close that education gap.
This is one of the topics that worries me the most. I know the other ones are important, but this worries me the most because the very first day I became a teacher at John F. Kennedy Middle in Riviera Beach, we talked about closing the achievement gap to 0. And we were pushing hard. We were making some great gains. And then COVID comes along. Well, obviously, it impacted our poorest students. Some of them are our most fragile students, especially our ESE students, our ELL students, whereas some students who had resources were able to carry on because of being able to work in pods or get tutors and such. And man, all that work seemed like we almost lost it all. But you know where else we lost it? We lost it socially. One of the biggest parts of school is sitting down in the lunchroom with your best friends, or going to PE, or being able to walk along a straight line with your friends as you walk to into the next class, music class or art class. And man, they've lost some of that, and they spend too much time on electronic devices, and you don't learn social really face to face. So that's one of the things we're also dealing with, the behaviors, and not bad behaviors, just behaviors that don't really line with social standards about going to school or being in groups, or how to address people, or how to say sir and ma'am and thank you and please. Those things that are very important in the big world. So that hurt too, because you're also developing a child socially when they come to school.
So educationally, how do you make it up? I mean, is it different lesson plans? Is it more classes? Is it extra? What is it? How do you do that?
It's all of those, but it's almost the same answer we gave you 8 minutes ago. Sticking to the standards and teaching what is important. Make sure that when they're tested on things they know about, and we can get them to that ultimate prize of graduating high school. It doesn't mean their life educationally is over, but that's our prize, and we have to stay focused on that.
And narrowing that achievement gap becomes incredibly important. It's all about making sure that we eliminate opportunity gaps for our students. And so interventions, tutorials, doing them right, material that is aligned, material and instruction that's creating an impact on learning is more important than ever. Just because we have no longer COVID, or we are in an environment that we feel like we might have forgotten what that was all about, the impact is still there. So let's not forget that. And one thing that we are really trying to look at is elevating the importance of proficiency in reading and proficiency in mathematics. Not necessarily only a year's worth of growth, but really that proficiency target. And so we are honing in on looking at that now, especially for our youngest students, but there's a heavy focus, at least in Dade, on 3rd grade. Why? 3rd grade is a benchmark. It's a gatekeeper to being fluent in reading and not being retained. Retention does not serve students well. And so we are taking a very careful look at those early grades to set the foundation.
Yeah, they sure do have their work cut out for them this year. Jim DeFede, he joins us live now. And Jim, neither of them was superintendent when the decision was made to close schools during the pandemic. But when you were talking to them, did they say how they're preparing for any scenarios that might, in fact, come their way?
Yeah, no, it was one of the things I wanted to find out is what were the lessons from COVID, not just educationally, but in terms of also just what to do about schools. And both men said that, you know, they wouldn't second guess the decision to close the schools because obviously it was a unique and difficult situation, but they both said that getting schools reopened as quickly and as safely as possible should always be the key. And, you know, just to pick up on something that Superintendent Dotres said about 3rd grade, you know, I remember my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. McVeigh, and she had a big impact on me. So I'll just give a shout out to her, wherever she may be in Brooklyn, if she's still around.
Maybe she's watching us on the stream. Okay, but Jim, let me get back to that 3rd grade because it really stuck with me, right? Superintendent Dotres said it is a benchmark. And then we talked about how the pandemic has really set children back. You look at the national averages and they are lower, but I didn't hear any tangibles. I didn't hear any specifics of how do we get them to that benchmark. You would ask, are there additional tutorials? Are there additional classes? So what's being done?
Some of those very things. I think they're really trying to work within each each teacher trying to do a little bit more, finding those students who were more adversely affected, as we saw during the pandemic. You know, there were some students who were able to, because of their economic standing, their parents, their family, were able to do better because they could have supplemental stuff like tutorials and those sorts of things. So it's the poorer students, it's the students who are more disadvantaged, the ones who could afford it least, who have to be targeted, and those types of interventions are going to be happening on a teacher by teacher, school by school level. So I do think that they have a way to try to make it up. I think it's hard to sort of have a one-size-fits-all plan for all students. I think it comes down to sort of identifying those needs for individual students at different grade levels too. You know, particularly, as you start talking about some of the high school kids who are now going into high school, missing those couple of years was pretty dramatic on them. Trying to rescue them in their final couple of years, trying to close that gap in those final couple of years is what's really sort of important for them now, but also those younger kids.
Right, but if the plan is to rescue them individually, that requires resources, and we're already dealing with a teacher shortage. So we'll see how this plays out. Hopefully they get there. They need to get there. So thank you, Jim. We do appreciate it.